Step out of the vehicle, now. Red and blue lights strobe through the Honda Civic. Empty road, pine trees, darkness pressing in. Maya Hollins keeps her hands on the steering wheel. 10 and 2. Visible. The flashlight cuts across her face. Lingers. I said step out. Not anger. Something colder. Decided. She switches on the interior light. Slow. Deliberate. May I ask the reason for this stop, Deputy? The radio crackles behind her. Dispatch, 1038, suspicious vehicle, older model Civic, single black female driver, requesting backup. Suspicious. The deputy's hand moves to his holster, and Maya Hollins begins to count the violations. If you're hooked already, hit subscribe and follow. You won't want to miss what happens when she finally reveals who she really is. Chapter 3 days earlier, the drive into Granger County had felt like stepping backward through time. Maya watched the landscape change through her windshield as she left the interstate behind. The strip malls and chain restaurants gave way to pine forests, then to open farmland dotted with cattle, then to the kind of small-town Main Street that seemed preserved in amber from some decade she had never actually lived through. Population 4,847, according to the faded sign at the county line. The number had been painted over at least twice. Her mother's house sat at the end of Oak Street, a pale blue single story with a wraparound porch and azalea bushes that needed trimming. Maya pulled into the gravel driveway and cut the engine, sat there for a moment, listening to the tick of cooling metal and the distant sound of someone's wind chimes. 11 months since her last visit. Too long. The screen door banged open before she could get her suitcase from the trunk. Baby girl. Ruth Hollins stood on the porch in a floral house dress, her gray hair pulled back in the same simple bun she had worn for as long as Maya could remember. 67 years old, retired from 31 years of nursing at the county hospital, and still the steadiest presence Maya had ever known. Hey, Mama. They met in the middle of the walkway. Ruth's arms wrapped around her, surprisingly strong, and Maya let herself be held. Just for a moment. Just long enough to remember what it felt like to be someone's child instead of someone's colleague. You're too thin, Ruth said, pulling back to study her face. They don't feed you up there in Washington? They feed me fine. I just forget to eat sometimes. Ruth's eyes narrowed in that knowing way mothers have. You working too hard again? Maybe. No, maybe about it. Come on inside. I've got sweet tea and leftover pie. Maya grabbed her suitcase and followed her mother up the porch steps. The house smelled exactly as it always had. Pine sol and lavender and something savory simmering on the stove. Her childhood bedroom had been converted into a guest room years ago, the posters and trophies replaced with neutral artwork and fresh linens. Maya set her suitcase on the bed and unzipped it. She unpacked methodically, shirts in the left drawer, pants in the right, toiletries arranged by size on the bathroom counter. Shoes lined up parallel beneath the window. From her carry-on, she removed a small spiral-bound notebook. Black cover, wire binding, small enough to fit in a back pocket. She opened it to a fresh page and wrote the date at the top in neat block letters. September 8th, 2024. Just a habit. The way she always started when entering unfamiliar territory. She tucked the notebook into her back pocket and went to find her mother. The Piggly Wiggly on Main Street was the only grocery store in Granger County. Maya pushed a cart through the narrow aisles the next morning, collecting the items on her mother's list. Flour, sugar, buttermilk, a pound of bacon. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and a country song played softly from speakers that had probably been installed during the Reagan administration. She was reaching for a carton of eggs when a white woman in yoga pants appeared at the end of the aisle. Mid-40s, blonde highlights, expensive-looking sunglasses pushed up on her head. The woman glanced at Maya, and something flickered across her face. Not quite fear, more like recalibration. The woman's hand drifted to her purse, fingers curling around the strap as she edged past, giving Maya a wider berth than the aisle required. Maya noted it, said nothing, added the eggs to her cart. At the checkout, The cashier was a young white man with acne scars and a name tag that read, Dustin. He scanned her items without looking at her, but when she handed over her debit card, he paused. "I'm going to need to see some ID with that." Maya raised an eyebrow. The total was $47. "For a debit card?" "Store policy." He didn't quite meet her eyes. "2 forms, please." She pulled out her driver's license, hesitated, then produced a secondary card from her wallet. Dustin examined both with more attention than $47 of groceries warranted. He wrote down her license number on a scrap of paper before handing them back. "Thank you for shopping with us." Maya loaded her groceries into plastic bags. She didn't ask why the white woman who had checked out before her hadn't been asked for any ID at all. "Get more." The gas station on Route 17 was one of those combination establishments that also sold live bait, lottery tickets, and hunting licenses. Maya pulled up to the pump and stepped out into the mid-morning heat. She was reaching for the nozzle when the patrol car appeared. It rolled into the lot slowly, deliberately, and parked at the pump directly beside hers. Close enough that she could read the insignia on the door. Granger County Sheriff's Office, the gold star, the motto beneath it, "Serving with integrity since 1892. The driver's door opened. The woman who stepped out wore sergeant stripes on her uniform sleeve. Late 40s, maybe early 50s, with short-cropped auburn hair and the kind of weathered tan that came from years of outdoor work. Her eyes swept over Maya with practiced assessment. "Morning." "Morning." Maya inserted her card into the pump, started fueling. The sergeant didn't reach for her own pump. Instead, she leaned against her cruiser, arms crossed, watching. "You visiting someone or just passing through?" Maya kept her voice neutral. "Visiting my mother." The sergeant's head tilted slightly. "Ruth Hollins? Over on Oak Street?" The question wasn't really a question. It was a demonstration. "That's right." "Thought so. Your mama's a good woman. Took care of my father when he was in the hospital, last year before he passed." The sergeant's tone softened slightly, but her eyes remained watchful. "She said her daughter worked up in D.C., some kind of government job." "Some kind." The pump clicked off. Maya replaced the nozzle, collected her receipt. "Well," the sergeant pushed off from her cruiser. "Welcome to Granger County. You need anything while you're here? The sheriff's office is right downtown. I'm Sergeant Crenshaw." Her name tag confirmed it. L. Crenshaw. Badge number 0041. Maya memorized both without appearing to. "Thank you, Sergeant. I'm sure I'll be fine." She got back into her car and pulled out of the lot. In her rearview mirror, Sergeant Crenshaw stood watching until she was out of sight. That evening, Ruth made catfish. They sat together at the kitchen table, the same pine table where Maya had done her homework as a child, and ate in comfortable silence. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "How are things here, Mama? Really?" Ruth considered the question while she chewed, took her time answering. "Quiet, mostly. Same as always." She reached for the pepper shaker. "Though I'll tell you, things have gotten different since Avery took over." "Avery?" "Sheriff Sloan Avery, elected 3 years ago, ran on a law and order platform." Ruth's mouth twisted slightly on the words. "You know what that means around here?" Maya knew. "His deputies have been aggressive. That's the word folks use. Aggressive." Ruth shook her head. "They stopped Deacon Williams 3 times last month. 3 times. Man's 82 years old, been driving the same route to church for 40 years. Suddenly, he's suspicious." "Did he file a complaint?" "Filed 2. Nothing happened. They said the stops were routine." Ruth set down her fork. "It's not just him either. The Carter's boy, Jamil. He's 17, works at the hardware store after school. They stopped him walking home last week. Made him sit on the curb for 30 minutes while they ran his information. In front of all his neighbors." Maya listened, asked questions, didn't share her own profession. Later, after the dishes were washed and Ruth had gone to bed, Maya sat on the porch with a glass of sweet tea. The crickets were loud, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked twice, then fell silent. She pulled out her notebook, wrote down what her mother had told her. Names, dates, incidents, just notes, just information, just habit. She told herself it was nothing more. Chug. The third night was when everything changed. Maya had spent the afternoon visiting an old high school friend who had moved to the next town over. They had coffee, caught up on 15 years of life, laughed about things that had seemed so important when they were 17. She left around 9, taking County Road 12 back toward her mother's house. The night was warm and clear, the road empty. Maya drove with her window cracked, letting in the smell of pine and wet earth. Her headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the center line, the reflective mile markers, the occasional possum scurrying into the underbrush. She was doing 32 in a 35 zone when the lights appeared behind her. Red and blue, sudden and bright, filling her rearview mirror. No siren, just the lights and the unmistakable shape of a patrol car closing the distance. Maya's hands tightened on the steering wheel, then relaxed. She checked her speed. 32, she signaled, pulled onto the shoulder, put the car in park. She reached up and switched on the interior light, placed both hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, exactly where they could be seen. The patrol car stopped behind her. Its spotlight clicked on, flooding her car with white light. She waited. Seconds passed, then a minute. She could see the silhouette of the deputy in her side mirror, talking on his radio. Finally, the door opened. Footsteps crunched on gravel. The deputy appeared at her window, flashlight beam hitting her directly in the eyes. He was young, late 20s maybe. Broad-shouldered with a buzz cut and a face that might have been handsome if it weren't twisted into an expression of barely concealed hostility. His name tag read Tanner. License and registration. Where are you coming from this time of night? Maya kept her voice calm. I'm happy to provide those, deputy. May I ask the reason for this stop? I'm asking the questions here. The flashlight didn't waver. License, registration, now. She moved slowly, narrating each action the way she had been taught. I'm reaching for my purse on the passenger seat. My license is in my wallet. She retrieved the documents, handed them through the window. Deputy Tanner examined them with his flashlight. His eyes flicked between the license and her face, back and forth, like he was looking for something that didn't match. This your current address? Yes. Says here Washington, D.C. His tone made it sound like an accusation. Long way from home. I'm visiting my mother, Ruth Hollins. She lives on Oak Street. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or just the realization that she wasn't a complete stranger. Wait here. He walked back to his cruiser, taking her license with him. Maya watched in her side mirror as he got back inside, closed the door, started talking on his radio again. She waited. 5 minutes. 10. The night pressed in around her. She was acutely aware of how alone she was, how dark the road was, how far from any witnesses. Her phone was in her purse. She considered reaching for it. Decided against sudden movements. But she could see its screen from where she sat, and she could reach the record button without looking. She did. The timestamp would read 9:47 p.m. Finally, Deputy Tanner returned to her window. His posture had changed, something harder in it now. Step out of the vehicle. Deputy, I've provided my license and registration. May I ask what this is regarding? I said step out. I'm documenting this interaction. She kept her voice steady. Level. What is the legal basis for this detention? His face went rigid. Ma'am, I'm not going to ask you again. I'm not refusing to comply. I'm asking a question. Under Terry v. Ohio, you need reasonable articulable suspicion to detain me. What is that suspicion based on? The name of the case hung in the air between them. She saw something shift in his expression. Not recognition. Something else. something like anger that she would know such things, would dare to invoke them. Step out. Maya turned off the ignition, removed the key, placed it on the dashboard in plain sight. She opened the door slowly, keeping her hands visible. Stepped out onto the gravel shoulder. Deputy Tanner was taller than she had realized, over 6 feet. He positioned himself close, invading her space. Turn around, hands on the vehicle. Deputy, I haven't done anything wrong. I was driving under the speed limit. I've provided all requested documentation. There is no legal basis for... I smell marijuana. The words cut through her sentence like a blade. Maya stared at him. I don't use marijuana. I've never used marijuana. My vehicle is clean. I'm going to search your car. I do not consent to a search. I don't need your consent. His hand moved to his radio. Dispatch, requesting backup on County Road 12. Female suspect, uncooperative. Suspect. She had gone from driver to suspect in the space of a sentence. Another patrol car arrived within 3 minutes. The backup deputy was younger, maybe 23 or 24, with nervous eyes that kept darting between Tanner and Maya. His name tag read Stall. Hold her here, Tanner said. I'm searching the vehicle. He spent 15 minutes going through her car, opened every compartment, checked under every seat, went through her purse, her glove box, the trunk. Found nothing. Because there was nothing to find. When he returned, his face was flushed. Not embarrassed, frustrated. The face of a man who had committed to a course of action and found reality uncooperative. Turn around. Deputy, you're being detained for obstruction. I have not obstructed anything. I have complied with every lawful order. You refused to exit the vehicle when directed. I asked a question. That is not refusal. His hand closed around her arm, hard enough to bruise. Turn around, hands behind your back. Maya felt the cold metal of handcuffs click around her wrists. You're being arrested for resisting arrest and obstruction of a law enforcement officer. I am not resisting. I would like this noted. I am complying. I am not resisting. She heard the backup deputy shift his weight, saw him look away. The radio crackled. 10:15, one in custody, one intound. Female, black, mid-30s, resisting. She had not resisted. The body cam on Deputy Tanner's chest was still blinking red, recording everything, but she knew how these reports got written. The Granger County Jail smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. Maya sat on a metal bench in a holding cell, her wrists still aching from the cuffs. The booking process had taken 2 hours. Fingerprints, mugshot. Personal effects cataloged and stored in a plastic bag. She had been charged with 2 misdemeanors. Resisting arrest without violence, Florida Statute 843.02. Obstruction of justice, Florida Statute 843.02. The same statute cited twice. She noted the sloppiness, the laziness of it. They allowed her 1 phone call. She called her mother. Mama, I need you to listen to me. I'm at the county jail. I've been arrested. Ruth's sharp intake of breath was audible through the phone. What? Baby, what happened? A traffic stop that escalated. I'll explain everything when I see you. Right now, I need you to stay calm. I'm going to be okay. I'll be out by morning. Maya, I'm okay, Mama, I promise. Don't worry. Can you come get me when they release me? It'll probably be around noon. I'll be there. Ruth's voice shook, but she steadied it with visible effort. You sure you're okay? I'm sure. You need me to call anyone else? A lawyer? Maya hesitated. She could make a different call, could invoke certain protections, but something held her back. Some instinct that this wasn't the right moment. Not yet, just come get me tomorrow. And Mama, write down exactly what I just told you, the time of this call, what I said. Your notes might matter later. Okay, baby. Okay. She hung up, sat back down on the metal bench. The holding cell had 3 other occupants. A young white man sleeping off what smelled like a long night of drinking. An older Hispanic woman staring at the wall, saying nothing. A middle-aged black man who looked at Maya with sympathetic recognition. "Traffic stop?" he asked quietly. "Traffic stop." He nodded. Like that explained everything. In Granger County, maybe it did. They released her at 11:42 the next morning. Bond had been set at $500. Ruth had paid it in cash, her lips pressed into a thin line that Maya recognized as contained fury. "Don't say anything yet," Maya murmured as they walked to the car. "Wait until we're home." They drove in silence. Ruth's hands were tight on the steering wheel, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. Only when they were inside the house, doors closed, curtains drawn, did Maya tell her mother everything. "They made it up," Ruth said when she finished. "All of it. The marijuana smell, the resisting. They made it up." "Yes. You did everything right. Everything they tell you to do. Hands visible. Interior light on. Compliance." Ruth's voice cracked on the last word. "And they arrested you anyway." "Yes." Ruth sat down heavily at the kitchen table. She looked older suddenly, tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. "What are you going to do?" Maya pulled her notebook from her back pocket, opened it to the pages she had filled during the sleepless night in that holding cell. "I'm going to file a complaint, and I'm going to request all records related to my arrest. Body camera footage, radio logs, the incident report, everything. They'll just lose it, or say the camera malfunctioned. That's what they did with Jamil Carter." "Maybe." Maya's voice was quiet, steady. "But I'm going to document every step, every response, every delay, and then we'll see." Ruth studied her daughter's face. Something passed between them, an understanding that didn't require words. "There's something you're not telling me." Maya hesitated, then nodded. "There is, but not yet, Mama. When the time is right, you'll understand." The Granger County Sheriff's Office Administrative Building was a squat brick structure that looked like it had been built in the 1970s and never updated since. Maya pushed through the glass doors at 9 a.m. the following Monday. The lobby was small and poorly lit. A row of plastic chairs, a bulletin board covered with wanted posters and community announcements, a reception window with bulletproof glass. The woman behind the glass was in her 50s, with graying hair and tired eyes. Her nameplate read, "Brenda Polk, Administrative Assistant." "Can I help you?" "I'd like to file a formal complaint against one of your deputies." Brenda Polk's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. She reached beneath the counter and produced a form. "Fill this out. Bring it back with any supporting documentation." Maya took the form. It was 4 pages long, densely printed, with boxes too small for the information they requested. She sat in one of the plastic chairs and began to write. Date and time of incident. Names of officers involved. Description of events. She used precise language, avoided editorializing, stuck to facts. When she returned the completed form to the window, Brenda Polk examined it with what might have been professional interest or might have been skepticism. "These usually take a while to process, just so you know." "How long is a while?" "Weeks, sometimes months." She stamped the form, wrote a number on a yellow sticky note, and passed it through the slot. "This is your case number. You can call to check on status, but honestly, we're understaffed. I wouldn't expect quick turnaround. Case number 2024 IA0847. Maya copied it into her notebook. "I'd also like to request copies of all records related to my arrest. The incident report, radio logs, body camera footage from Deputy Tanner and any other officers on scene." Brenda Polk's eyebrows rose slightly. "You'll need to file a public records request for that. Separate form." "I'll take that form too." She left 30 minutes later with copies of both forms, stamped and dated. The woman at the window had watched her fill out every line, her expression carefully neutral. But as Maya reached the door, Brenda Polk spoke again. "Ms. Hollins." Maya turned. "Be careful." The words were quiet, almost too quiet to hear through the glass. "These things, they don't always go the way you expect." Maya held her gaze for a moment. "Thank you for the advice." She pushed through the door and stepped into the sunlight. Word spread quickly in a town of 4,000 people. By Wednesday, everyone seemed to know that Ruth Hollins' daughter had filed a complaint against Deputy Tanner. The reactions varied. At the hardware store, old Mr. Patterson gave Maya a quiet nod of solidarity. At the post office, the clerk processed her mail without making eye contact. At the Piggly Wiggly, Dustin the cashier watched her with a wariness that hadn't been there before. And at church on Sunday, the congregation divided itself along invisible lines. Ruth attended Grace Baptist every week, had for 40 years. She sat in the same pew, third from the front on the left side, next to the same friends she had known since childhood. Today, some of those friends found reasons to sit elsewhere. "Don't let them see it bothers you," Ruth murmured as they took their seats. "It doesn't." "Liar." Maya almost smiled. The service was unremarkable. Hymns she remembered from childhood. A sermon about forgiveness that felt pointed given the circumstances. Afterward, there was coffee and small talk in the fellowship hall. Maya was pouring cream into her cup when she felt someone approach. Sergeant Crenshaw stood beside her, also holding a coffee cup, wearing civilian clothes instead of her uniform. A floral blouse, pressed slacks, small gold earrings. "Miss Hollins, I didn't know you attended here." "I'm visiting my mother. She's attended here for 40 years. "Of course." Crenshaw's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I was sorry to hear about your troubles the other night." "Were you?" Traffic stops can be stressful. Things get misinterpreted, taken out of context. She sipped her coffee. "I'm sure once IA reviews everything, it'll all get cleared up." "I'm sure it will." Crenshaw's gaze drifted across the room to where Ruth stood talking with an elderly deacon. "Your mama's a good woman, pillar of this community. It would be a shame if—" She paused, seeming to search for the right word. If any unpleasantness were to affect her standing here. Her relationships. Maya set down her coffee cup, slowly, deliberately. "Sergeant Crenshaw, are you threatening my mother?" "Threatening?" Crenshaw's eyebrows rose in exaggerated surprise. "Goodness, no. Just making an observation, making accusations against law enforcement officers. That follows a person. The accuser, I mean. Even if the accusations don't pan out. People remember." She patted Maya's arm with a familiarity that felt like a violation. "Just friendly advice." She walked away before Maya could respond. Ruth appeared at her elbow a moment later. "What did she want?" "To deliver a message." "What kind of message?" Maya watched Crenshaw move through the crowd, greeting people, shaking hands, laughing at someone's joke. "The kind that confirms I'm on the right track." Chuck. 2 weeks after her arrest, Maya appeared at the Granger County Courthouse for her arraignment. The building was a century-old structure of red brick and white columns, incongruously grand for a county of this size. Maya climbed the steps in a navy blue dress she had bought specifically for this occasion, conservative and professional. Ruth walked beside her, wearing her church clothes. The courtroom was smaller than Maya had expected. Wood paneling, hard wooden benches, an American flag, and a Florida state flag flanking the judge's bench. The prosecutor was already seated at his table when Maya entered. Young, late 20s, with sharp features and an expensive suit that seemed out of place in a county courthouse. His hair was slicked back, his briefcase leather, his watch gold. Dorian Vance, assistant district attorney. Maya's public defender was already there too. Alan Cross, mid-50s, rumpled suit, tired eyes. He looked up when she approached and gestured to the seat beside him. "Ms. Hollins, let's talk before the judge comes in." They huddled together at the defense table. Cross kept his voice low. I'm going to be straight with you. Cases like this, they rarely go well for... He stopped himself, started again. The DA's office is pushing for trial. They're citing the seriousness of resisting arrest. For asking the reason for a traffic stop? That's not how they're framing it. He shuffled through papers. Look, I can probably negotiate a plea. Disorderly conduct, reduced from the original charges. $200 fine. No jail time. Case closed. Record sealed after a year. I'm not pleading guilty to something I didn't do. Cross sighed, the sigh of a man who had heard those words many times before. Ms. Hollins, I understand your frustration. I do. But you have to understand what we're up against here. It's your word against a deputy's. In this county, with this jury pool. He met her eyes. The math isn't good. Has discovery been completed? Mostly. We have the incident report, the radio logs, body camera footage. Cross hesitated. There's a problem with that. What kind of problem? The footage from Deputy Tanner's camera is corrupted, unrecoverable, according to the IT report. Same with the backup deputy's camera. Server malfunction. Maya absorbed this information. Let it settle into the pattern that was already forming in her mind. Both cameras, the exact same night. Both malfunctioned. That's what the report says. And you believe that? Cross was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. What I believe and what I can prove in court are two different things, Ms. Hollins. We work with what we have. The bailiff's voice cut through the room. All rise. The Honorable Judge Patricia Weston presiding. They stood. The arraignment proceeded. Dorian Vance presented the charges with practiced precision. His voice was confident, his posture aggressive. He painted a picture of a hostile defendant who had escalated a routine traffic stop through her own belligerence. Judge Weston, a stern-faced white woman in her 60s, listened without expression. How does the defendant plead? Maya stood. Not guilty, Your Honor. A murmur rippled through the sparse gallery. Ruth sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. Very well. Trial date is set for November 15th, 8 weeks from today. The judge made a note. The defendant is released on existing bond. Any motions? Yes, Your Honor. Alan Cross stood. The defense moves to compel production of all body camera footage from the night of September 11th. The prosecution has provided an IT report claiming corruption, but we believe recovery may still be possible with proper forensic analysis. Dorian Vance rose immediately. Your Honor, the footage has been certified as unrecoverable by the department's IT specialist. This is a fishing expedition designed to delay proceedings. The footage goes to the heart of the defense's case, Your Honor. Without it, we're left with competing narratives and no objective record. Judge Weston considered for a moment. I'll allow limited discovery on the footage issue. The prosecution will provide the defense with access to the original storage media for independent forensic review at the defense's expense. Motion granted in part. It was a small victory, but Maya noted it. After the hearing, she stopped Alan Cross in the hallway. I want copies of everything, every document, every piece of evidence, every report. He looked at her with something like curiosity. Most defendants don't ask for that. I'm not most defendants. No. He studied her face. No, you're not. You think like a lawyer, you know that? She didn't correct him. God. The discovery materials arrived 10 days before trial. Maya spread them across her mother's kitchen table. Incident reports, radio transcripts, booking records, witness statements. The IT report on the camera malfunction. She read every word. Twice. The incident report was fiction. Deputy Tanner's account bore almost no resemblance to what had actually happened. According to his written statement, Maya had been weaving across the center line. had been verbally aggressive from the moment he approached, had refused to provide identification, had made a sudden movement toward her waistband, prompting him to draw his weapon. None of it was true. Every line was a lie. But it was his word against hers, in writing, with a badge behind it. The IT report was interesting. It was dated September 14th, 3 days after her arrest, but the malfunction it described had allegedly occurred on the night of September 11th. 3 days to report a server error. 3 days of silence. And the technician who signed the report, T. Morrow, IT liaison. Maya wrote the name in her notebook, then circled it. She visited the IA office 2 days later. The Internal Affairs Unit was housed in a separate building from the main sheriff's office, a converted insurance office with beige carpet and fluorescent lights. The sergeant in charge of internal investigations met her in the lobby. Sergeant Wells Morrow was in his 40s, with thinning hair and a paunch that strained against his uniform shirt. His handshake was damp. His smile was too wide. "Miss Hollins, thank you for coming in. How can I help you?" "I filed a complaint 3 weeks ago. Case number 2024 IA0847. I'd like a status update." Of course. He led her to a small conference room. Offered coffee she declined. Settled into a chair across from her with his hands folded on the table. "I've been reviewing your case personally. Very seriously. We take all complaints seriously here at the Granger County Sheriff's Office." "I'm glad to hear it. What's the status?" "Well, these things take time, you understand. We have to interview all parties involved, review all available evidence, make sure we're being thorough." He spread his hands. "Wouldn't want to rush to judgment." "The body camera footage from that night has been reported as corrupted. That seems like a significant piece of evidence to lose." "Unfortunate, yes. Server issues. Happens sometimes." The IT report was signed by T. Morrow. "Is that a relative of yours, Sergeant?" Something flickered across his face, just for an instant. "My brother, actually. He handles IT for the department. Small county, you know. Everybody's related to everybody." His smile returned, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Is there anything else I can help you with, Ms. Hollins?" "I'd like a status update in writing, sent to my mother's address." "That's not standard procedure." "What is standard procedure?" Morrow was quiet for a moment. Then he stood, signaling that the meeting was over. "I'll be in touch, Ms. Hollins. These things just take time. I'm sure you understand." She understood more than he realized. 1 week before trial, Maya was leaving the public library when someone tried to kill her, or at least that's how it felt. She had spent 3 hours at the library, using their computer to print case documents and research Florida precedents on traffic stops. The parking lot was nearly empty when she stepped outside, just her Honda and 2 other cars baking in the afternoon sun. She was walking toward her vehicle when she heard the engine. The truck came from nowhere. A dark blue pickup, older model, no front plates. It rolled through the lot faster than parking lot speed, angled directly toward her car. Maya froze for a fraction of a second. Then instinct took over. She dove to the right just as the truck clipped her Honda's front bumper. The impact was hard enough to shove her car sideways, hard enough to jolt through her bones as she hit the pavement. The truck didn't stop. It accelerated toward the exit, tires squealing, and disappeared onto the main road. Maya lay on the hot asphalt for a moment, breathing hard. Her palms were scraped. Her knee throbbed where she had landed on it. But she was alive. "Good Lord, are you all right?" An elderly white man was hurrying toward her from the library entrance. He had been watching from the steps, she realized, had seen everything. She accepted his hand and let him help her up. "I'm fine, just shaken." That was no accident. The man's face was pale with shock. "He aimed for you. I saw him. He swerved toward you." "Did you see the driver?" "Couldn't make out the face. Too much glare on the windshield." He shook his head. "But the truck, I've seen it before. Belongs to one of the deputies. Seen it parked outside the station." Maya looked at her car. The front bumper was dented, The headlight cracked, but it was drivable. "What's your name, sir?" Howard Finch. Mr. Howard Finch. Finch, would you be willing to give a statement about what you saw?" He hesitated. She could see the calculation in his eyes, the weighing of civic duty against personal risk. Yes, I would." They called 911 together. The responding officer took 15 minutes to arrive. He was young, unfamiliar, his name tag reading Novak. He took their statements with minimal interest, wrote down Howard Finch's contact information, examined the damage to Maya's car. His report, when she obtained a copy weeks later, would list the incident as minor traffic incident. No suspects identified. But Maya had noticed something in that parking lot, something she had done without thinking. She had parked facing outward, near the exit. A habit. An old habit, from years of training that emphasized awareness and escape routes. It had probably saved her life. Trial preparation consumed the remaining days. Maya sat with Alan Cross in his cramped office, surrounded by stacks of files and empty coffee cups. She had brought her own research, case law, precedents, arguments. Cross leafed through her notes with growing surprise. Terry v. Ohio, Rodriguez v. United States, Florida v. Bostic. He looked up at her. "You've really done your homework." "I do that. This is thorough, more thorough than most attorneys would prepare." He set the notes down. "Where did you say you worked in Washington?" "Government." He didn't push. "Well, I think we have a solid argument on the body cam spoliation. If we can convince the jury that the department destroyed evidence, that creates reasonable doubt about the deputy's version of events." "Will they go for it?" "Maybe. This county," he sighed. "Let's just say there's a lot of blue support. But not everyone here is blind. Some folks have their own stories, their own experiences." "What about the DA, Vance?" "Ambitious, very ambitious. He sees this as a chance to prove he's tough on cop challengers." Cross made air quotes. "He's not going to back down easily." Maya nodded. She had expected as much. "There's one more thing," she said. "Something I haven't told you." Cross leaned back in his chair, waiting. "I have a recording. Audio only. I started recording on my phone when the lights appeared behind me. The whole interaction is documented." Cross stared at her. "You have a recording of the entire traffic stop?" "Yes. And you're just telling me this now?" "I needed to see how this would play out first, whether the system would work on its own." She met his gaze. "It didn't." Cross was silent for a long moment. Then he laughed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief. "Ms. Hollins, you are not who I thought you were." "No," she agreed. "I'm not." Trial day. The courtroom was more crowded than it had been at the arraignment. Word had spread. Deputy Tanner's arrest of a D.C. woman was going to trial. People wanted to see how it would end. Ruth sat in the front row of the gallery, wearing her best Sunday dress. Behind her, Maya recognized some faces from church. Deacon Williams, the Carters. Others she didn't know. Sheriff Sloan Avery himself was present, sitting in the back row. He was older than she had expected, early 60s, with silver hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades of outdoor work. His uniform was crisp. His expression was unreadable. Sergeant Crenshaw sat beside him, watching. The prosecution presented its case first. Dorian Vance was polished, confident. He walked the jury through the traffic stop as Deputy Tanner had described it. The weaving vehicle, the aggressive driver, the sudden movement that had forced the deputy to draw his weapon, the resistance that had necessitated arrest. He called Deputy Tanner to the stand. Tanner was in full uniform, his hair freshly cut, his badge gleaming. He took the oath with practiced ease. "Deputy Tanner, please describe for the jury what occurred on the night of September 11th. Tanner's voice was steady, rehearsed. I observed the defendant's vehicle weaving across the center line on County Road 12. Classic signs of impairment. I initiated a traffic stop to investigate. Maya sat perfectly still. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her face showed nothing. And when you approached the vehicle? The defendant was immediately hostile, refused to provide identification, started making demands, citing legal cases, trying to intimidate me with lawyer talk. He shook his head sadly. I asked her to step out of the vehicle. She refused. Started reaching toward her waistband. I feared for my safety. What did you do then? I drew my weapon and ordered her out of the car. She eventually complied, but she kept arguing, kept challenging my authority. I had to call for backup. And the backup deputy arrived? Deputy Stahl. Yes. I conducted a search of the vehicle. Didn't find any contraband, but her behavior was consistent with someone trying to hide something. The agitation. The refusal to cooperate. Did you smell marijuana, as your report indicates? I did. Faint, but present. That's what prompted the search. Lie after lie after lie. Maya watched him deliver them with the confidence of a man who had never faced consequences. Alan Cross rose for cross-examination. Deputy Tanner, you testified that the defendant was weaving across the center line. Is that correct? That's correct. Can you describe the weaving? How many times did you observe her vehicle cross the line? It was several times, over about a quarter mile. Several times. Would you say 3 times, 5 times, 10? Tanner hesitated. Maybe 3 or 4. 3 or 4 times in a quarter mile. And yet your report doesn't mention any specific number. It just says erratic driving. I was summarizing. I see. Deputy Tanner, the defendant's vehicle is a 2019 Honda Civic. Are you familiar with that model? I know it's a smaller car. It's known for its stability and handling, not typically a vehicle prone to weaving without driver input. Cross picked up a document. According to your incident report, you stated that the defendant, quote, made a sudden movement toward her waistband, end quote. Did you observe a weapon? I observed movement consistent with, did you observe a weapon? Yes or no? No, but... No. And when you searched her vehicle, did you find any weapons? No. Any contraband of any kind? No. Any evidence of the marijuana you claim to smell? The smell doesn't always mean there's product present. People consume and dispose. Deputy Tanner, yes or no? Did you find any marijuana or marijuana-related paraphernalia in the defendant's vehicle? A pause. No. No. Deputy Tanner, there should be body camera footage of this entire interaction. Your camera was recording, wasn't it? It was, and yet that footage is unavailable. The department claims it was corrupted. Is that your understanding? Technical issues. It said something about a server malfunction. The IT specialist who made that determination. T. Morrow. Is he related to Sergeant Wells Morrow, who is in charge of internal affairs? Dorian Vance shot to his feet. Objection. Relevance. Your Honor, the chain of custody and reliability of evidence is directly relevant to this case. Judge Weston considered. I'll allow it. The witness will answer. Tanner's jaw tightened. They're brothers. It's a small department. I see. So the officer in charge of investigating complaints against you is the brother of the technician who declared the only objective evidence of this interaction unrecoverable. Is that correct? Objection. Counsel is implying misconduct without foundation. Withdrawn. Cross turned back to the witness. Deputy Tanner, I have one more question. You testified that the defendant was hostile, that she refused to provide identification, that she reached for her waistband. Do you stand by that testimony, under oath? Tanner met his eyes. I do. No further questions. The courtroom was silent as Cross returned to the defense table. He caught Maya's eye, gave her a small nod. Now. Your Honor, The defense calls the defendant, Maya Hollins. Maya rose and walked to the witness stand. She took the oath, settled into the chair. Alan Cross approached. Ms. Hollins, please tell the jury, in your own words, what happened on the night of September 11th. She told them. Every detail, the speed she was driving, the lack of any traffic violation, her immediate actions when the lights appeared, hands on the wheel, interior light on, calm compliance. Deputy Tanner has testified that you were hostile, that you refused to provide identification. Is that accurate? No. I provided my license and registration immediately upon request. I asked one question, the reason for the stop. That is my right under the Fourth Amendment. He testified that you made a sudden movement toward your waistband. My hands remained visible throughout the interaction, on the steering wheel, then at my sides when I exited the vehicle. I made no sudden movements of any kind. He testified that he smelled marijuana. I have never used marijuana in my life. There was no marijuana in my vehicle because I don't possess marijuana and never have. Cross paused. Let the silence stretch. Ms. Hollins, is there any objective record of what happened that night? Yes. Maya's voice was steady. There is. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. She saw Dorian Vance sit up straighter, saw Sheriff Avery lean forward. Please explain. When I saw the lights behind me, I activated the voice recording function on my phone. Audio only. The recording captured the entire interaction, from the moment I pulled over until the moment I was placed in the patrol car. Timestamp 9:47 p.m., September 11th, 2024. The murmur became a wave. Voices rose. Judge Weston banged her gavel. Order. Order in the court. Dorian Vance was on his feet. Your Honor, this evidence was not disclosed during discovery. The defense cannot introduce surprise evidence at trial. Your Honor, the defense disclosed this evidence 3 days ago within the required window. The prosecution received copies. If Mr. Vance failed to review his own materials, that's not the defense's problem. Judge Weston's eyes narrowed. Is this true, Mr. Vance? The prosecutor shuffled through his papers. His face reddened slightly. I see the disclosure now, Your Honor. I apologize. I had not reviewed it. Then sit down. The judge turned back to Maya. Continue. Cross approached with a laptop, connected it to the courtroom's audio system. Your Honor, I move to play the recording for the jury. Objection! Chain of custody. We have no proof this recording hasn't been altered. Your Honor, the defense has provided certification from an independent forensic audio analyst confirming the recording is authentic and unedited. The certification is in the court's files. I'll allow it. Play the recording. The courtroom fell silent, and then Maya's voice filled the room. May I ask the reason for this stop, Deputy? Calm, steady, polite. Then Tanner's voice, harsh, aggressive. I said, step out. I'm documenting this interaction. What is the legal basis for this detention? No hostility from her, no refusal to cooperate, just a woman asking a question. The recording played on, every moment, every word. It captured Maya providing her license immediately, captured Tanner's claim about marijuana when there had been no hesitation, no sniffing, no examination, captured Maya's calm statement that she did not consent to a search, captured her quiet compliance when he ordered her to turn around. I am not resisting. I would like this noted. I am complying. I am not resisting. Her voice, clear, documented, and then Tanner's response. Turn around, hands behind your back. The cuffs clicking. The recording ended. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Maya looked at the jury, looked at their faces, saw doubt where there had been certainty, saw anger where there had been indifference. She looked at Deputy Tanner. His face was pale. His hands gripped the railing of the witness stand. He looked like a man who had just watched his own future collapse. She looked at the gallery, at Sergeant Crenshaw, who had risen from her seat and was moving toward the door, at Sheriff Avery, whose expression had finally changed, though Maya couldn't quite read it. At her mother, whose eyes were bright with tears. Alan Cross turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard Deputy Tanner's testimony. You have heard my client's testimony, and now you have heard what actually happened. The only question remaining is, what are you going to believe? A man who lied under oath, or your own ears?" Dorian Vance's closing argument was perfunctory. He spoke about the difficulty of police work, about split-second decisions, about giving law enforcement the benefit of the doubt. It felt thin, empty. Even he seemed to know it. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They returned at 4:17 p.m. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." The foreperson was a middle-aged white woman, a schoolteacher, according to the jury selection notes. She held the paper in front of her and read, "On the charge of resisting arrest without violence, we find the defendant not guilty." Ruth's hand flew to her mouth. "On the charge of obstruction of justice, we find the defendant not guilty." The courtroom erupted. Voices, movement. Someone was crying. Someone was shouting. Maya stood very still. She had won. The system had worked this once, in this courtroom, on this day. But as she watched Deputy Tanner's face twist with rage, as she saw Sergeant Crenshaw slip out the back door, as she noticed Sheriff Avery's cold stare fixed on her like a targeting laser, she understood something. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. That night, 2 things happened. The first, Maya sat on her mother's porch, drinking sweet tea, watching the fireflies dance in the darkness. "You should be celebrating," Ruth said. "I am celebrating, in my own way." "By sitting here looking like you're planning a war?" Maya almost smiled. "Maybe I am." Ruth was quiet for a moment. Then she reached over and took her daughter's hand. "There's something you still haven't told me, about who you really are, what you really do." "Yes." "Is it dangerous, what you're about to do?" Maya considered the question, really considered it. "It might be. But you're going to do it anyway." "Yes." Ruth squeezed her hand. "Then you do what you have to do, and you let me know if there's anything I can do to help." "You already have, Mama, more than you know." The second thing happened at 11:23 p.m. Maya's phone buzzed. A text message from a number she didn't recognize. She opened it. Inside was a photograph. A photograph of her, taken that morning outside the courthouse. She hadn't noticed anyone with a camera. Below the photograph, a message. "You won today. But Granger County has a long memory, and we know where your mother lives." Maya stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she opened her contacts. Scrolled to a number she hadn't called in weeks. A number in Washington, D.C. A number that connected to a man named Paul Whitmore, Deputy Inspector General, Department of Justice, her supervisor for the past 4 years. She typed a message. "I need to report a pattern of civil rights violations. Granger County, Florida, and sir, I was the target." She hit send. Then she sat back and waited for what would come next. 3 floors below the Department of Justice headquarters, in a secure room with no windows, a phone buzzed. Paul Whitmore picked it up, read the message, read it again. He had known Maya Hollins for 7 years, had recruited her himself, had watched her become one of the best investigators in the office of the Inspector General. He also knew that when Maya Hollins said there was a pattern, there was a pattern. He picked up his desk phone, dialed an internal extension. "This is Whitmore. I need to convene a threat assessment team, priority 1, and get me everything we have on Granger County, Florida." He hung up, looked at his phone again. Maya had sent a second message while he was on the call. "It's worse than the text made it sound. I have recordings, documents, witnesses, and I have a sheriff's department that just committed perjury in open court." Whitmore allowed himself a small smile. The people of Granger County thought they had won. They had no idea what was coming. The morning after the verdict, Maya woke before dawn. She lay in her childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the old house settling around her. The creak of floorboards, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the first tentative chirps of birds in the oak tree outside her window. Her phone sat on the nightstand, its screen dark. Paul Whitmore had responded to her message at 2:14 a.m. Understood. Stand by for secure call at 0800. Do not discuss with anyone. She had slept maybe 3 hours. It was enough. At 7:45, she dressed in jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, poured herself a cup of coffee from the pot Ruth had already made, and stepped out onto the back porch. The morning was cool for September, a hint of the autumn that would eventually come even to Florida. At exactly 8 o'clock, her phone rang. A blocked number. She answered. Hollins. It's Whitmore. His voice was the same as always, calm, measured, revealing nothing. I've reviewed your preliminary report. Tell me everything. She told him. The traffic stop, the false charges, the corrupted body cam footage, the trial, the perjury, the threatening text message. The recording you made during the stop, Whitmore said when she finished. You still have the original file? On my personal device, backed up to encrypted cloud storage. Chain of custody is clean. Good. What about the text message? The threat? Screenshot saved. Phone company records will show the originating number, though I expect it's a burner. Probably. A pause. You said the IT specialist who declared the bodycam footage unrecoverable is the brother of the IA sergeant handling your complaint. Wells Morrow and Thomas Morrow, yes. That's a conflict of interest that would make any federal prosecutor salivate. Another pause, longer this time. Maya, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Go ahead. Do you want to pursue this, officially? Because once we open a federal investigation, there's no closing it quietly. These people will know who you are, what you are. And if there's a pattern of civil rights violations in that county, which I suspect there is, the blowback will be significant. Maya looked out at her mother's backyard. The garden Ruth tended so carefully, the bird feeder hanging from the magnolia tree, the peaceful, ordinary life her mother had built in this place. They already threatened my mother, sir. They've already made this personal. The question isn't whether I want to pursue it. The question is whether I can live with myself if I don't. Silence on the line. Then a sound that might have been a quiet laugh. That's what I thought you'd say. Whitmore's voice shifted, becoming more businesslike. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to extend your leave. Personal reasons. I'll handle the paperwork. You're going to continue documenting everything, but you're not going to identify yourself as OIG to anyone. Not yet. Understood. In the meantime, I'm going to pull records on Granger County, complaint histories, settlement payouts, demographic data on traffic stops and arrests. If there's a pattern, we'll find it. And when we have enough to justify federal intervention, we'll move. How long? Weeks. Maybe a month. These things take time to build properly. You know that. She did know. She had built dozens of cases over her 11 years with the Office of the Inspector General. She knew the patience required, the meticulous attention to detail, the slow, grinding process of assembling evidence that would hold up under the most hostile scrutiny. One more thing, Whitmore said. The deputy who perjured himself, Tanner, he's still on active duty? As far as I know. That'll change, but not yet. Let him think he got away with it. Let them all think they got away with it. When we move, I want it to be overwhelming. Yes, sir. Stay safe, Maya, and call me immediately if there are any more threats. The line went dead. Maya stood on the porch for a long moment, coffee cooling in her hands. The sun was fully up now, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. She had been given permission to do what she would have done anyway, but having official sanction made it easier, cleaner. Now came the hard part. Waiting. 3 days after the trial, Maya drove to the state attorney's office in the adjacent county. The 12th Judicial Circuit covered 3 counties, including Granger. Its main office was in Bradenton, 45 minutes away, a world removed from the small-town dynamics that had shaped her arrest and prosecution. The building was modern, all glass and steel, with a lobby that smelled like new carpet and printer toner. Maya signed in at the security desk and was directed to the 3rd floor. The intake prosecutor who met her was young, late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and the kind of sharp, assessing eyes that came from too many hours reviewing case files. "Ms. Hollins, I'm Carla Reeves, Assistant State Attorney. Please, have a seat." The office was small but neat. Diplomas on the wall, family photos on the desk, a stack of folders that threatened to topple at any moment. "Thank you for seeing me. Your request was unusual." Reeves pulled a legal pad toward her. "You want to file a criminal complaint against a Granger County deputy for perjury. That's correct." Deputy Gage Tanner testified under oath at my trial. His testimony was materially false, and I have an audio recording that proves it. Reeves's eyebrows rose slightly. "The same recording that resulted in your acquittal?" "Yes. I've heard about that case. It made some waves around here." She tapped her pen against the legal pad. "You understand that prosecuting a law enforcement officer for perjury is difficult. Juries are reluctant to convict. Defense attorneys argue about perception versus reality, about the fog of memory, about reasonable interpretation of events. I understand the challenges. And you want to proceed anyway." "Deputy Tanner didn't misremember events, Ms. Reeves. He invented them. He testified that I was weaving across the center line when I was driving 3 miles under the speed limit in a straight lane. He testified that I refused to provide identification when I provided it immediately upon request. He testified that I made a sudden movement toward my waistband when my hands were visible on the steering wheel the entire time." Maya leaned forward slightly. "That's not perception. That's not memory. That's perjury under Florida Statute 837.02. Reeves studied her for a long moment. "You speak like someone who knows the law." "I know enough." She made a note on her legal pad. "I'll be honest with you, Ms. Hollins. Even with your recording, getting a conviction would be an uphill battle. Deputy Tanner will have lawyers. He'll have the police union behind him. He'll have sympathetic jurors who believe that cops don't lie. Some cops don't. This one did, under oath, in open court." "I'm not disagreeing with you." Reeves set down her pen. "I'm telling you what you're up against. But I'll take your statement. I'll review the evidence, and I'll make a recommendation to the state attorney about whether to proceed. That's all I'm asking." The statement took 2 hours. Maya walked Reeves through every detail of the night in question, provided copies of the audio recording with its authentication certificate, and signed the formal complaint. As she was leaving, Reeves called after her. "Ms. Hollins." Maya turned at the door. "Between us. Off the record." Reeves's voice was quiet. "You're not the first person to complain about that department. You're just the first one with proof." Maya nodded slowly. "I suspected as much. Be careful. The people you're going after, they have a lot of friends, and not all of them wear badges." The public records requests began arriving 2 weeks after the trial. Maya had filed 7 separate requests under Florida's Sunshine Law, targeting different categories of information. Citizen complaints against sheriff's office personnel, settlement payments in civil rights cases, demographic data on traffic stops, internal affairs investigation outcomes, body camera maintenance logs, personnel files for specific deputies, email communications regarding her own case. The responses came slowly, in dribs and drabs, often heavily redacted. The first useful document was the statistical summary she had requested: citizen complaints against Granger County Sheriff's Office personnel from 2021 to 2024. She spread the pages across her mother's kitchen table and began to analyze. 12 formal complaints in 3 years, all against deputies, all involving allegations of excessive force, false arrest, or harassment. 12 complaints, 12 investigations, 12 findings of unfounded or exonerated. 0 discipline. She looked at the demographics. Of the 12 complainants, 11 were black, 1 was Hispanic. Of the 12 deputies complained against, all 12 were white. 100% complaint closure rate, 0% discipline rate. The pattern was stark, mathematical, undeniable. She wrote it all down in her notebook, then made 3 copies. Boak. The email leak arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Maya was returning from the post office when she saw the envelope on the doormat. Plain white. No return address. Postmarked from Jacksonville. She picked it up carefully, noting its weight, its feel. Not heavy enough for a threat. Not ticking. Inside, she found 3 pages of printed emails. Internal Sheriff's Office correspondence. Dates ranging from September 12th to September 15th, the days immediately following her arrest. The first email was from Sergeant Wells Morrow to Sergeant Lila Crenshaw.
From dumorrow@granger.sheriff.fl.gov to L. Cree Renshaw at granger.sheriff.fl.gov. Date: September 13th, 2024. Subject: Hollins complaint. Delay processing until after court date, per SA. Per SA. Per Sheriff Avery. The second email was from Sheriff Avery himself. From savory@granger.sheriff.fl.gov to dumorrow@granger.sheriff.fl.gov. Date: September 14th, 2024. Subject: Hollins complaint. Handle it. I don't want this becoming a thing. Handle it. 3 words that told a story of institutional cover-up. The third email was more cryptic. A chain between 2 addresses she didn't recognize, with the sender's names redacted. From redacted to redacted. Date: September 15th, 2024. Subject: damage control. Cameras are taken care of. T confirmed file deletion successful. Tell GT to stick to the script and this goes away. GT, Gage Tanner. T. Thomas Morrow, the IT specialist. Maya photographed each page, made 3 copies, stored them in separate locations. Then she sat down and considered the question that mattered. Who had sent this? Someone inside the department, someone with access to internal emails, someone willing to take an enormous risk to expose corruption. The Jacksonville postmark suggested careful thought. Jacksonville was where the federal courthouse was located, where federal law enforcement had offices. Someone wanted her to know. Someone wanted her to have proof. She thought about the people she had encountered. Brenda Polk, the nervous administrative assistant who had warned her to be careful. Deputy Stahl, the backup officer who had looked uncomfortable during her arrest. Geneva Wade, the county clerk whose nephew worked at the federal building. One of them? Someone else entirely? The answer didn't matter yet. What mattered was what she did with the information. She picked up her phone and composed a message to Paul Whitmore. New evidence. Internal emails showing deliberate obstruction. Chain of custody established. Requesting secure channel for transmission. His response came within minutes. Sending encrypted upload link. Priority classification. The 4th week after the trial, Maya returned to the county clerk's office. She needed additional court records, case files from the past 3 years. Specifically, she was looking for civil rights lawsuits filed against the Granger County Sheriff's Office that had been settled or dismissed. The clerk's office was quiet that morning, just Maya and an elderly man renewing his vehicle registration. Geneva Wade was behind the counter, her gray hair pinned up in its usual style, her reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up when Maya approached. Something passed across her face. Recognition. And something else. Ms. Hollins, back again. I need to pull some civil case files, settlements involving the sheriff's office.
Of course. Geneva began the paperwork. That'll take a few minutes. Want to have a seat? Maya sat in one of the plastic chairs against the wall. Waited. When Geneva called her back to the counter, she handed over a stack of file folders. But as Maya reached for them, Geneva's hand closed over hers. My nephew works at the Federal Building in Tallahassee. Her voice was barely above a whisper. He called me last week. Said there's been some activity. People asking questions about our little county. Maya kept her expression neutral. Is that so? He said something else, too. Geneva's eyes met hers. Said if anyone could fix this place, it's someone like you. Someone like me. Someone who knows how things work. How to make the people at the top pay attention. Geneva released her hand, straightened the files between them. There's good people here, Ms. Hollins. People who've been waiting a long time for someone to listen. Maya picked up the files. I hear them. Geneva nodded once, then returned to her work as if nothing had happened. 6 weeks after the trial, Paul Whitmore called again. This time, it wasn't a secure line. It was a video conference, and Maya could see him clearly for the first time since she had left Washington. He looked older than she remembered, more tired, but his eyes were the same. We've completed the preliminary assessment, he said. You were right. There's a pattern. How bad? Bad enough for a full pattern or practice investigation under 34 U.S.C. September 12601. Bad enough that the Civil Rights Division is interested. Bad enough that I'm sending a team to Florida next week. Maya let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Timeline? We'll serve the warrant on the sheriff's office within 10 days. Search and seizure of all bodycam storage, internal affairs files, email archives, and any documents related to citizen complaints going back 5 years. Whitmore paused. You're recused, of course. Conflict of interest. You're a witness now, not an investigator. I understand. But I wanted you to know before it happens, and I wanted to ask, how's your mother holding up? Maya glanced toward the kitchen where Ruth was washing dishes. Still in her house, still tending her garden, still pretending that everything was normal. She's tough, tougher than me, probably. Good, because when this goes public, there's going to be attention. Media, maybe protests. Granger County is about to become a very uncomfortable place to be. We're ready. Are you? Whitmore's eyes searched hers through the screen. You've been doing this work for 11 years, Maya. You've never been the victim before. It changes things. The way you see the system. The way the system sees you. I know. Just be prepared. That's all I'm saying. The federal vehicles arrived on a Thursday morning. 3 black SUVs with government plates rolled into Granger County at 9 a.m. and parked in front of the sheriff's office administrative building. Men and women in dark suits and FBI windbreakers emerged, carrying briefcases and equipment cases. Maya watched from across the street, the parking lot of the public library, the same lot where someone had tried to run her down weeks ago. She sat in her car with the engine off, just watching. She saw Sheriff Avery come out the front door, saw his face go pale when the lead agent presented the warrant, saw him make a phone call that was probably to his lawyer. She saw deputies being escorted out, told to wait in the parking lot while their offices were searched. Saw Sergeant Crenshaw arguing with an agent, her face red with fury. Saw Sergeant Morrow try to slip out a side door and be intercepted. She saw boxes being carried out, computer towers, filing cabinets wheeled on dollies. She didn't see Deputy Tanner anywhere, probably on patrol, probably unaware that his world was crumbling. The search took 7 hours. When the federal vehicles finally pulled out, loaded with evidence, the sun was setting and the sheriff's office looked like a crime scene, which Maya reflected it was. The IA hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after the federal raid. It was technically a county proceeding, separate from the federal investigation, but everyone understood that the two were connected. The county commissioners, suddenly aware that their jurisdiction was under federal scrutiny, had hired an outside hearing officer to provide a veneer of impartiality. Patricia Helm was a former prosecutor from Tampa, now in private practice, with a reputation for fairness and an immunity to political pressure. She arrived in Granger County like a cold front, and the atmosphere in the courthouse dropped 10 degrees. The hearing was held in the main courtroom, the same room where Maya had been tried and acquitted. She arrived early, dressed in a navy blue suit she had bought for this occasion. Ruth wanted to come, but Maya had asked her to stay home. This was going to be difficult enough without worrying about her mother's reaction. The room filled slowly. Deputy Tanner at the respondent's table, flanked by a union lawyer. Sergeants Crenshaw and Morrow in the gallery, looking like they were attending their own funerals. Sheriff Avery in the back row, his expression carved from stone. And then, just before the proceedings began, Paul Whitmore slipped in through a side door. Maya caught his eye. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, a silent confirmation. The federal team had recovered the bodycam footage. Patricia Helm called the hearing to order. This is an administrative disciplinary hearing regarding case number 2024 IA0847, complaint filed by Maya E. Hollins against Deputy Gage Tanner and, subsequently, expanded to include Sergeants Wells Morrow and Lila Crenshaw. The purpose of this hearing is to determine whether departmental policies were violated and, if so, what disciplinary action is appropriate. She looked at Tanner's lawyer. Respondent's counsel, your client is accused of filing a false incident report, providing false testimony under oath, and conduct unbecoming an officer. How does he respond? The lawyer stood. He was in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive watch. His name was Charles Hartley, and he had represented deputies in at least a dozen misconduct cases. Deputy Tanner categorically denies all allegations. He performed his duties in accordance with training and policy. Any discrepancies in his account are the result of the inherent stress of a rapidly evolving encounter, not intentional falsehood. Noted. Ms. Hollins, you are representing yourself in this proceeding? Maya stood. I am. Very well. You may present your evidence. Maya approached the podium. She had practiced this moment in her mind 100 times. The words, the order, the rhythm. Now she just had to execute. Thank you, Ms. Helm. I'll be presenting evidence in 3 categories. First, the audio recording I made during the traffic stop. Second, the recovered bodycam footage from Deputy Tanner's camera. And third, internal emails that demonstrate a deliberate effort to suppress my complaint and destroy evidence. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Tanner's lawyer was on his feet. Objection. The bodycam footage was certified as unrecoverable by the department's IT specialist. Any footage presented now has questionable chain of custody. Patricia Helm's gaze was cold. Mr. Hartley, the footage was recovered by the FBI Digital Forensics Unit pursuant to a federal search warrant. I have reviewed the authentication certificate. The chain of custody is impeccable. She turned back to Maya. Proceed. Maya activated the first recording, her audio from the night of the traffic stop. The courtroom heard what the jury had heard at trial, the calm questions, the aggressive responses, the lies that had been told about her behavior. Then came the bodycam footage. The screen showed the stop from Tanner's perspective, his dashboard camera as he followed her Honda, the empty road, the complete absence of any weaving, his approach to her window, flashlight blinding, voice harsh from the first moment. The footage showed Maya's hands on the wheel, showed her interior light on, showed her calm compliance, her quiet questions, her lack of any threatening movement. It showed Tanner's claim about smelling marijuana, delivered without any hesitation or sniffing, almost like a line he had prepared in advance. It showed the arrest, the cuffs, the radio call claiming she was resisting when she was standing motionless with her hands behind her back. The courtroom was silent. Patricia Helm turned to Deputy Tanner. Deputy Tanner, you testified at the criminal trial that the defendant was weaving across the center line. The footage shows her driving in a straight line. Would you like to explain the discrepancy? Tanner's lawyer leaned over, whispered something. Tanner shook his head. I'm exercising my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Noted. Helm's expression didn't change. You testified that the defendant refused to provide identification. The footage shows her handing over her license within seconds of being asked. Would you like to explain? Fifth Amendment. You testified that the defendant made a sudden movement toward her waistband. The footage shows her hands remained visible throughout the encounter. Would you like to explain? Fifth Amendment. Maya watched Tanner's face as he repeated the phrase. Watched the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes darted to his lawyer, to the gallery, to anywhere but the screen where his lies were playing on a loop. He had lied in court. Now he was refusing to answer questions about those lies. The Fifth Amendment would protect him from criminal prosecution based on his statements here, but it wouldn't protect him from administrative consequences. Patricia Helm turned to Maya. Ms. Hollins, you mentioned internal emails. Please present them. Maya pulled out the printed pages, read them aloud. From Sergeant Wells Morrow to Sergeant Lila Crenshaw, September 13, 2024. Subject, Hollins complaint. Delay processing until after court date, per S.A. She looked at Sheriff Avery in the back row. His face was blank, but a vein pulsed in his temple. From Sheriff Sloan Avery to Sergeant Wells Morrow, September 14, 2024. Subject, Hollins complaint. Handle it. I don't want this becoming a thing. She read the third email, the one about the cameras, the one that mentioned file deletion successful and tell GT to stick to the script. These emails, Maya said, demonstrate a coordinated effort to obstruct my complaint, destroy bodycam evidence, and coach Deputy Tanner on his testimony. This is not a case of one rogue officer making mistakes. This is institutional corruption at the highest levels of the Granger County Sheriff's Office. Charles Hartley objected. These emails were obtained without proper... Mr. Hartley. Patricia Helm's voice could have frozen lava. These emails were authenticated by federal investigators and are part of the official record. Your objection is overruled. Sit down. He sat. Helm turned to Sergeant Morrow. Sergeant Morrow, you are the Internal Affairs Officer for this department. Did you delay processing Ms. Hollins' complaint as indicated in this email? Morrow looked at his own lawyer, then back at the hearing officer. I'm taking the fifth. Did you instruct your brother to delete bodycam footage related to this case? Fifth. Helm's gaze moved to Sergeant Crenshaw. Sergeant Crenshaw, did you receive instructions to delay the Hollins complaint? Crenshaw's face was flushed with anger, but her voice was steady. I'm exercising my Fifth Amendment rights. Did you threaten Ms. Hollins or her family members during the pendency of this complaint? Fifth. Finally, Helm looked at Sheriff Avery. Sheriff Avery, this hearing does not have jurisdiction over you as an elected official. However, I'm required to note for the record that multiple emails presented in evidence suggest your direct involvement in the suppression of a citizen complaint and the destruction of evidence. Do you have any statement? Avery stood slowly. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, with the bearing of someone who was used to being in charge. His voice was gravel. I deny all allegations of wrongdoing. I have full confidence in my officers. And I believe this entire proceeding is a politically motivated witch hunt designed to undermine law enforcement in this county. He sat back down. Helm made a note. Then she closed her folder. This hearing is in recess. I will deliver my findings and recommendations within 30 days. She stood, left the room. The hearing was over. But as Maya gathered her materials, she felt a presence beside her. Paul Whitmore, speaking quietly. The grand jury convenes next month. Federal, Northern District. Tanner, Morrow, possibly others. And the sheriff? Insufficient evidence for criminal charges, but his political career is over. Whitmore paused. You did well today. 11 years of training, and I've never seen you better. Maya looked across the room at Gage Tanner, who was being escorted out by his lawyer. At Crenshaw and Morrow, huddled together like survivors of a shipwreck. At Sheriff Avery, still sitting in the back row, staring at nothing. It's not over yet, she said. No, but the hard part is done. She wasn't sure she agreed. Patricia Helm delivered her findings 26 days later. The document was 12 pages long, single-spaced, with footnotes and citations to departmental policy, Florida law, and federal constitutional standards. Maya read it at her mother's kitchen table while Ruth sat across from her, waiting. Deputy Gage Tanner, sustained on all counts, filing of false incident report, providing false testimony under oath, conduct unbecoming, violation of citizens' Fourth Amendment rights, recommended discipline, termination, referral to Florida Criminal Justice Standards and Training Commission for decertification proceedings. Sergeant Wells Morrow, sustained on counts of obstruction of internal investigation, destruction of evidence, and conduct unbecoming. Recommended discipline, suspension without pay, pending criminal investigation. Sergeant Lila Crenshaw, sustained on count of obstruction of internal investigation, unfounded on count of witness intimidation due to insufficient corroboration. Recommended discipline, written reprimand, transfer to administrative duties. Sheriff Sloan Avery, outside jurisdiction of this proceeding, matter referred to Granger County Commission and Florida Department of Law Enforcement for appropriate action. Maya set down the document. Crenshaw got a reprimand, Ruth said, after what she said to me at church. It was my word against hers. No witnesses, no recording. That's not justice. No. Maya shook her head slowly. It's not, but it's what we got. Ruth reached across the table and took her hand. What happens now? Now we wait for the grand jury, the federal charges. That's where the real accountability happens. And if they don't indict? Maya thought about that question, had thought about it many times over the past weeks. Then we try again. Different avenue, different pressure. You don't fix a system like this with one victory. You fix it with 1,000 small cuts, year after year, until the people in charge realize it's easier to change than to keep fighting. Ruth was quiet for a moment. 11 years, she said finally. You've been doing this for 11 years, fighting these battles, watching people get away with things. How do you keep going? Maya looked at her mother, at the gray hair and the tired eyes and the strength that had never wavered, not once, in all the years she had known her. Because someone has to. And because sometimes, if you're patient enough and careful enough, you get a moment like this. She squeezed Ruth's hand. A moment when the people who thought they were untouchable finally realize they're not. The federal grand jury convened in January. The venue was the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Florida, a modern building in Tallahassee that felt a world away from the worn courtrooms of Granger County. Maya was called as a witness on the third day. She testified for 4 hours, walked through every detail of the traffic stop, the arrest, the trial, the investigation, presented her audio recording, her documentation, her analysis of the complaint patterns. The grand jurors listened intently, asked questions, took notes. 3 weeks later, the indictments were handed down. United States of America versus Gage Tanner, case number 425C00112. Count 1, perjury in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 121. Count 2, deprivation of rights under color of law in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 242. Count 3, conspiracy to obstruct justice in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 371. Maximum sentence if convicted on all counts, 22 years. United States of America v. Wells Morrow, case number 425CR00113. Count 1, obstruction of justice in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 1519. Count 2, destruction of evidence in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 1519. Count 3, conspiracy in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 371. Maximum sentence, 20 years. Thomas Morrow, the IT specialist, was named as an unindicted co-conspirator. meaning he had likely cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for immunity. Sheriff Sloan Avery was not indicted. The grand jury found insufficient evidence of direct criminal conduct. The emails suggested knowledge, not participation. It wasn't enough. But 2 days after the indictments were announced, Avery held a press conference. He stood on the steps of the sheriff's office, in front of the gold star and the motto about serving with integrity, and announced that he would not seek re-election. For personal reasons, he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes were not. The news spread quickly. Cable networks picked up the story. A black woman acquitted of false charges, then vindicated by federal investigation. A small-town sheriff's department exposed for systemic corruption. Bodycam footage that had been lost mysteriously recovered by FBI forensic experts. It was exactly the kind of story that captured public attention. Dramatic, clear-cut, satisfying. Maya watched the coverage from her mother's living room, flipping between channels. Federal authorities have released new details in the Granger County case, one anchor said. The FBI's Digital Forensics Unit was able to recover video footage that had been deliberately deleted from department servers. That footage directly contradicts the testimony of Deputy Gage Tanner, who now faces federal perjury charges. Another channel showed Tanner's mugshot. His face looked smaller somehow, diminished. The Department of Justice has announced a pattern or practice investigation into the Granger County Sheriff's Office under 34 U.S.C. Section 12601. If the investigation confirms widespread civil rights violations, a federal monitor may be appointed to oversee reforms. Ruth came in from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel. You should be happy. You won. I won a battle. The war goes on. Always does. Ruth sat down beside her. You know what your father would say if he was here? Maya smiled slightly. He'd say, told you so. He always knew the system was rigged. He'd say he was proud of you, for fighting back, for not giving up. Ruth's voice was soft. I'm proud of you too, baby. Even if you don't feel like celebrating. Maya leaned her head against her mother's shoulder. For a moment, she let herself feel the weight of everything. The exhaustion, the relief, the strange, hollow sensation of a victory that still felt incomplete. Avery got away with it, she said. He's not going to prison, he's just retiring. Some justice is better than no justice. I know, you wanted all of them, every single one who was responsible. Yes. Ruth was quiet for a moment. The Lord works in mysterious ways, she said finally. Maybe Avery's punishment is watching everything he built get torn down. Maybe it's knowing that everyone knows what he did, even if they can't prove it in court. Maybe it's living with that knowledge for the rest of his life. Maybe. Or maybe, Ruth said, someone will find something else. More evidence, more emails. You never know what might turn up down the road. Maya looked at her mother, at the calm certainty in her eyes. You sound like you know something I don't. Ruth just smiled and went back to the kitchen. The plea negotiations began in March. Maya wasn't directly involved, but Paul Whitmore kept her informed through secure channels. Tanner's lawyer was pushing for a deal. The evidence was overwhelming. A trial would be brutal. In the end, Tanner pled guilty to 1 count of perjury and 1 count of deprivation of rights. The conspiracy charge was dropped in exchange for his cooperation in identifying others who had participated in the cover-up. He was sentenced to 37 months in federal prison, 3 years and 1 month, plus 3 years of supervised release afterward, plus permanent loss of law enforcement certification. It wasn't 22 years, but it was something. Wells Morrow pled guilty to obstruction of justice. He received 18 months plus 5 years probation. His brother Thomas, who had cooperated from the beginning, received no prison time but lost his job and his IT certifications. Sergeant Crenshaw faced no criminal charges. She resigned from the department 2 weeks after the indictments were announced, citing health reasons. Last Maya heard, she had moved to another county and was working as a security guard at a shopping mall. The Department of Justice finalized its pattern or practice investigation in April. The findings were damning. 18 pages of documented violations. Discriminatory traffic stops, excessive force, suppression of complaints, falsified reports. A federal monitor was appointed to oversee reforms. The monitor would remain in place for 18 months, with the possibility of extension if progress was insufficient. The Granger County Sheriff's Office was required to implement mandatory body camera activation, with automatic upload to a server administered by an outside contractor. External review of all internal affairs complaints, implicit bias training for all personnel, demographic tracking of all traffic stops, arrests, and use of force incidents. The reforms were announced at a press conference in May. The new interim sheriff, a career administrator named Janet Wallace, read from prepared remarks. "We are committed to rebuilding trust with our community. We acknowledge that mistakes were made. We are determined to ensure they never happen again." Maya watched the press conference from Washington. She had returned to work 2 weeks earlier, her leave finally over. Her desk was piled with new case files, new investigations, new patterns waiting to be uncovered. She wondered if the reforms would stick, if the policies would be enforced, if Janet Wallace, the interim sheriff, would be any different from the people who had come before her. She wondered, but she didn't know. Some things you could only measure in years. The letter arrived in June. Maya was in her D.C. apartment, reviewing case files at her kitchen table, when she heard the mail drop through the slot. She walked over, picked up the small pile of envelopes, and froze. One of them was addressed to her in handwriting she didn't recognize. No return address, postmarked from Granger County, Florida. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, not handwritten. The message was brief. What happened to Deputy Stahl? That was all. No signature, no explanation. Maya stared at the words. Kevin Stahl, the backup deputy who had been present at her arrest, the one who had looked uncomfortable but said nothing, the one who, according to testimony during the grand jury proceedings, had told prosecutors that Tanner ordered him to keep his mouth shut after the arrest. She had assumed Stahl had returned to normal duty, had moved on, had kept his head down, and continued his career in a department under federal supervision. She pulled out her phone, made a call. "Whitmore? Sir, it's Hollins. I need you to check on something. Deputy Kevin Stahl, Granger County Sheriff's Office. What's his current status?" A pause. The sound of typing. "Stahl, Kevin. Badge number 0127. More typing. "That's strange. What?" "He filed a whistleblower complaint with the Department of Labor 3 weeks ago. Alleged retaliation for cooperating with federal investigators." Whitmore's voice was careful. "But there's no follow-up. The complaint is still open, but the complainant hasn't responded to inquiries." Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Can you find him? An address? A phone number?" "I can try. Give me a few hours." She hung up, stared at the letter again. What happened to Deputy Stahl? Chart. The answer came 3 days later, and it wasn't what Maya expected. Stahl was alive. He had moved out of Granger County the week after filing his whistleblower complaint, relocating to a small town in Georgia where his sister lived. He hadn't responded to inquiries because he had changed his phone number and email address, trying to disappear. But he was willing to talk to Maya. She drove down from Washington, an 8-hour trip that she made in one stretch. Stahl's sister's house was a modest ranch on a quiet street, with a chain-link fence and a dog that barked at her arrival. Stahl met her at the door. He looked different from the nervous young deputy she remembered. Thinner, older somehow, though only months had passed. "Ms. Hollins, thank you for coming." "Deputy Stahl. Just Kevin now. I resigned." He held the door open. "Please, come in." They sat in the living room. His sister brought coffee, then disappeared into another part of the house. "You filed a whistleblower complaint," Maya said. "Then you vanished." "I had to. They were making my life impossible." Stahl wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "After I testified to the grand jury, Word got around. I was being frozen out. Dangerous calls, no backup. My locker vandalized. Someone slashed my tires 3 times in 2 weeks. Did you report it? To who? IA was compromised. The sheriff was on his way out, but still had friends. The union rep told me I should have kept my mouth shut. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I grew up in that county. My parents are buried there, and I had to leave because I told the truth. Maya was quiet for a moment. The letter I received, was that from you? No. Stahl frowned. What letter? She showed him. His face went pale. This wasn't me. I didn't send this. Then who did? I don't know, but whoever it is, they knew something was wrong. They knew I was in trouble before even I fully understood it. Maya looked at the letter again. The plain type. The Granger County postmark. The same person who had sent the emails? Someone else? A friend of Stahl's trying to raise an alarm? An enemy trying to bait her? She didn't know, and the uncertainty gnawed at her. Tell me about the retaliation, she said. Everything. From the beginning. Stahl talked for 2 hours, documented incidents, names, dates, the slow, grinding process of being pushed out. When he finished, Maya closed her notebook. I can't promise anything, but I can refer your case to the appropriate division. Retaliation against a federal witness is a serious matter. Will it change anything? Maybe, maybe not. She met his eyes. But it'll be on the record, and records matter. They're how patterns get identified, how systems get changed, how people finally pay attention. Stahl was quiet for a long moment. You know what the hardest part was? It wasn't the slashed tires or the cold shoulders. It was realizing that the people I thought were my friends, the people I had worked with for 4 years, they saw me as a traitor. Not for doing something wrong, for doing something right. I know. Do you? Really? Maya thought about 11 years of investigations, the anonymous tips that led nowhere, the witnesses who recanted, the systems that protected their own. Yes, she said, I really do. The months that followed were quiet. The Federal Monitor filed quarterly reports on Granger County's progress. Traffic stop data showed a significant reduction in racial disparities. Complaint processing times improved. Body camera compliance reached 98%. Whether the changes were real or cosmetic, whether they would last beyond the monitoring period, remained to be seen. Gage Tanner began serving his sentence at a federal correctional institution in Alabama. His appeal was denied. His wife filed for divorce. Wells Morrow was incarcerated at a minimum security facility in Florida. He was scheduled for release in 14 months. Sheriff Avery faded from public view. Rumors placed him at a fishing cabin somewhere in the Panhandle, or at a son's house in Tennessee, or drinking himself into oblivion at a bar in Tallahassee. The truth was probably less dramatic. Kevin Stahl's retaliation case was referred to the Office of Special Counsel. It would take months to investigate, possibly years. Such things always did. Maya returned to her work in Washington. New cases, new patterns, new battles to fight. But she kept a folder on Granger County, updated it when new information came in, watched and waited. Some cases closed, others just continued. Chapter 2. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Maya was at her desk, reviewing a case file on a police department in Ohio, when her phone buzzed. The caller ID showed Granger County Clerk, Geneva Wade. Miss Hollins, it's Geneva, from the clerk's office. Geneva, it's good to hear from you. I'm calling because, well, there's something I think you should see. I wasn't sure whether to reach out, but then I thought, if anyone would want to know, it would be you. What is it? One of the archived boxes from the old sheriff's office. The ones they moved to storage after the federal raid. Someone was doing inventory last week, and they found a folder that wasn't logged. It had been wedged behind a filing cabinet. Might have been there for years. Maya sat up straighter. What's in the folder? Complaints, old ones, going back 15 years, all against the same deputy. A pause. Deputy Gage Tanner. Before he was Tanner, I mean. Before his divorce. When he was still using his first wife's last name. What was the name? Hartley. Like the lawyer who represented him. Maya's blood went cold. Charles Hartley. Tanner's union lawyer. His ex-father-in-law. They kept it quiet. But these complaints, Ms. Hollins, they're not small things. Assault, intimidation. One woman accused him of, well, something very serious, something that should have ended his career before it started. Maya was already reaching for a pen. Can you make copies? Send them to me? Already done. They're on their way by certified mail, but I thought you'd want to know immediately. Thank you, Geneva. I don't know how to... Don't thank me. Geneva's voice was quiet but firm. Just do what you do. Make it matter. The line went dead. Maya sat very still. 15 years of complaints. Hidden behind a filing cabinet. A union lawyer who was the suspect's ex-father-in-law. A pattern that went back even further than anyone had realized. The case she thought was closed had just blown wide open. The documents arrived 3 days later. Maya spread them across her desk, reading each one with growing horror. 2009. A woman named Patricia Vance accused Deputy Tanner, then using the name Hartley, of excessive force during a traffic stop. Complaint dismissed. Insufficient evidence. 2011. A man named Marcus Williams alleged that Deputy Hartley had planted evidence during a search of his vehicle. Complaint dismissed. Insufficient evidence. 2013. A woman named Denise Carter accused Deputy Hartley of sexual harassment during a domestic violence call. Complaint dismissed. No corroboration. 2014. A teenage boy named Jerome Washington alleged that Deputy Hartley had assaulted him during a stop and frisk, breaking his arm. Complaint dismissed. Contradicted by officer testimony. 15 complaints over 15 years. Different names, different allegations, but the same pattern. Dismissed, dismissed, dismissed. And the hearing officer who had dismissed most of them, whose signature appeared on file after file. Wells Morrow, then just a junior deputy in the Internal Affairs Unit. Maya felt sick. These weren't isolated incidents. This was a system working exactly as designed, protecting its own, silencing its victims, erasing the evidence of its failures. She picked up her phone. Whitmore, I have something you need to see. The second investigation took 6 months. This time, the scope was broader. Not just the current sheriff's office, but its predecessors. The culture of impunity that had allowed someone like Tanner to abuse his authority for over a decade. New victims came forward. Some had been afraid to speak before. Some hadn't known their stories mattered. Some had assumed, with good reason, that no one would believe them. Maya interviewed them herself, traveling back to Florida again and again, sitting in living rooms and diners and church basements, listening to stories that had been buried for years. Patricia Vance, Marcus Williams, Denise Carter, Jerome Washington, now in his late 20s, his arm still crooked from where it had healed wrong. She documented everything. Built a second case, then a third. Found connections that no one had seen before, patterns within patterns. Charles Hartley, the union lawyer who had defended his ex-son-in-law, was referred to the Florida bar for ethics violations. He resigned rather than face a hearing. Wells Morrow, already in prison for obstruction, saw his sentence extended after new evidence emerged linking him to the cover-up of the 2013 sexual harassment complaint. And Gage Tanner, serving his original 37 months, was indicted on 12 new counts of civil rights violations spanning his entire career. The new charges would add decades to his sentence. The final plea deal, negotiated after months of wrangling, resulted in an additional 15 years. He would be in his 60s when he got out, if he got out. The ceremony was held on a warm day in April. Maya stood in the reception hall of the Department of Justice, wearing a dress she had bought for the occasion, surrounded by colleagues and supervisors she had worked with for over a decade. Paul Whitmore was at the podium. "It is my privilege to present the Attorney General's Award for Distinguished Service to Special Agent Maya E. Hollins in recognition of her extraordinary courage, dedication, and commitment to justice in the Granger County investigation. Her work has resulted in the conviction of multiple law enforcement officers, the implementation of comprehensive reforms, and the vindication of countless victims whose voices had been silenced for years." Applause filled the room. Maya walked to the podium, accepted the plaque, shook hands with the Attorney General himself. She gave a short speech, thanked her colleagues, acknowledged the victims who had trusted her with their stories, dedicated the award to her mother, who was watching via video link from Granger County. Afterward, at the reception, a young agent approached her. "Agent Hollins, I'm new to the unit. Just wanted to say, your case is the reason I applied for this job. What you did, standing up to a whole system, it's inspiring." Maya smiled slightly. "It wasn't just me. It was never just me. There were people in that county who had been fighting for years before I showed up. Geneva Wade, Brenda Polk, Deacon Williams, Jameel Carter, Kevin Stahl. They're the ones who deserve the credit. But you're the one who made it stick. Maybe. Or maybe I was just the one who happened to have a badge and a recording device at the right moment." She patted the young agent's shoulder. "The work is what matters. Work is what—" Not the awards, not the recognition, just the work, one case at a time, until the systems that hurt people start to change. Is that possible? Real change? Maya thought about Granger County, about the federal monitor still in place, about the new policies that might be enforced or might not, about the cultural shifts that would take a generation to measure. "Ask me in 20 years, she said. "Maybe I'll know by then." That night, Maya called her mother. "I saw the ceremony," Ruth said. "You looked beautiful and tired." "I am tired." "Then come home. Take a vacation. A real one this time, not the kind that turns into a federal investigation." Maya laughed. It felt good to laugh. "Soon. I have a few things to wrap up first, but soon." "You said that 6 months ago." "I mean it this time." Ruth didn't sound convinced. "You know, Mr. Patterson asked about you the other day, at the hardware store. Wanted to know when Ruth's famous daughter was coming back to visit." "Famous?" "That's what he said. Everyone knows about what you did. It's in the papers, on the news. Granger County is actually proud of something for once." Maya was quiet for a moment. "And what about the people who weren't proud? The ones who thought I was causing trouble?" "Some of them changed their minds. Some of them never will." Ruth's voice was soft. "That's how it always is. You can't reach everyone. You just do what you can and let the Lord sort out the rest." "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, baby. Now get some sleep. And come home soon." 3 weeks later, Maya was back in Granger County. She drove down on a Friday afternoon, windows open, radio playing, the same route she had taken almost 2 years ago when this all began. The landscape hadn't changed. Pine forests, farmland, small towns that seemed frozen in time. But when she crossed into Granger County, she noticed differences. The welcome sign had been repainted. The sheriff's office had new cars, new signage. A banner on the courthouse announced a community policing initiative. Surface changes. Whether they reflected something deeper remained to be seen. Ruth was waiting on the porch when she arrived. They embraced for a long moment. "You look better," Ruth said. "Rested." "I took your advice, actually took a week off." No cases, no files, just sleep and bad movies. That's my girl. They spent the weekend together, cooked meals, went to church, visited Ruth's friends, who treated Maya with a warmth that hadn't been there before. On Sunday afternoon, Maya drove out to County Road 12. She parked on the shoulder, near the spot where Deputy Tanner had pulled her over. Got out, stood in the grass, looking at the empty road. Nothing marked the place. No plaque, no monument. Just asphalt and pine trees and the sound of crickets. 2 years ago, she had been a woman on vacation, visiting her mother, minding her own business. Now she was, apparently, famous. A symbol, a name people invoked when they talked about justice and accountability. She didn't feel like a symbol. She felt like someone who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time and had possessed the rare combination of skills and credentials to make the people responsible pay for it. Lucky, in a way. Even as she had been unlucky. She thought about all the others who had come before her, the complaints dismissed, the voices silenced, the patterns ignored. They hadn't been lucky. They hadn't been believed. They had lived with the weight of what had been done to them, alone, for years. That was the part the ceremonies and the awards didn't capture. The cost. The damage that could never fully be undone. But maybe, just maybe, the next person who got pulled over on this road would have a different experience. Maybe the deputy who approached their window would think twice before inventing a story. Maybe the body cam would stay on, and the footage would be preserved, and the truth would matter. Maybe. Maya got back in her car and drove away. The envelope was waiting for her when she returned to Washington. Plain white. No return address. Postmarked from Jacksonville. She opened it. Inside was a single photograph. A group shot taken at what looked like a law enforcement conference. Men in suits, shaking hands, smiling at the camera. Sheriff Sloan Avery was in the center of the frame. Beside him stood a man Maya recognized from news reports. A state senator from the Panhandle, known for his hardline positions on policing. On the other side of Avery was a face she didn't recognize, but the caption beneath the photo, handwritten in neat block letters, identified him. Special Agent Marcus Hollins, FBI, Jacksonville Field Office. Below the caption, another handwritten line, "He was the leak, but not for the reasons you think." Maya stared at the photograph, the anonymous emails, the leaked internal correspondence that had helped break the case open. She had always wondered who had sent them, who had taken the risk. Now she had a name, and a suggestion that the story was more complicated than she had understood. She sat down at her desk, pulled up her secure laptop, began to search. 2 hours later, she had the outlines of something. Not proof, not yet, but a shape, a pattern. Special Agent Marcus Hollins had been stationed in Jacksonville for 6 years. Before that, he had served in Miami, Tampa, and Atlanta. His career was spotless, his record impeccable. But there were gaps, unexplained transfers, periods where his activity seemed to decrease, then spike again. The kind of irregularities that might mean nothing or might mean everything. And buried deep in an old news archive, a photograph from 15 years ago. A group of young law enforcement officers at a training academy. Hollins was in the photo. So was Gage Tanner. So was Wells Morrow. They had trained together, before any of them had badges, before any of them had made choices that would define their careers. Maya picked up her phone, hesitated. This could be nothing. A coincidence. An old connection that had no bearing on anything that had happened. Or it could be the thread that, when pulled, unraveled something much larger than a single county's corruption. She made the call. "Whitmore, I have something I need you to see." The investigation into Marcus Hollins took 18 months. It was conducted quietly, carefully, with none of the publicity that had surrounded the Granger County case. Internal affairs at the FBI, the Inspector General, a special task force that reported only to the highest levels. Maya was not directly involved. She was too close to the original case, too recognizable, but she consulted, provided background, watched from the sidelines as the threads she had identified were traced to their source. The picture that emerged was more complicated than corruption. It was about loyalty, old friendships, the bonds forged in training that persisted even when paths diverged. Hollins had not leaked the emails to help Maya. He had leaked them to protect himself. He had known, for years, about the misconduct in Granger County. Had known because Tanner and Morrow had bragged about it, back when they were young men who thought they were untouchable. When the federal investigation began, Hollins realized that his knowledge made him complicit. If anyone looked closely, if anyone found the old connections, he would be implicated. So he had tried to get ahead of it. Leak the emails, point investigators in the right direction, establish himself as a good actor, a whistleblower, rather than a bystander who had looked the other way for 15 years. It had almost worked. It might have worked if not for the second anonymous envelope, if not for the photograph. Maya never learned who sent that photograph. Someone inside the FBI who suspected Hollins was not what he seemed. Someone with access to old files and a long memory. Someone who had been waiting, perhaps, for someone like Maya to notice. Hollins was eventually charged with failure to report a known crime and making false statements to investigators. Minor charges, given what he could have been charged with, but enough to end his career, enough to send a message. The sentencing hearing was brief. Hollins, gray-faced and diminished, stood before the judge and accepted 12 months of probation, loss of pension, and permanent exclusion from law enforcement. Maya watched from the gallery. When it was over, Hollins glanced in her direction. Their eyes met. She saw something in his face, not anger, not resentment, something more like recognition, the acknowledgement that he had played a game, and lost, and understood why. He looked away, was led from the courtroom. Maya sat for a moment longer, thinking. Hollins had been a complication, an unexpected twist in a story she had thought was complete. His downfall was, in its way, its own kind of justice. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like another reminder of how deep the rot could go, how far the tendrils of complicity could reach, how many people, in how many positions, had to look the other way for abuses to continue unchallenged. She left the courthouse and stepped into the sunlight. The final report from the Federal Monitor was issued in September, 3 years after Maya's traffic stop on County Road 12. The report was cautiously optimistic. Significant progress had been made. Policies had been implemented. Metrics had improved. But the Monitor also noted ongoing challenges: staff turnover, budget constraints, a culture that was slow to change. Sustainable reform, the report concluded, will require continued vigilance, community engagement, and institutional commitment extending beyond the monitoring period. The foundation has been laid. Whether it will be built upon remains to be seen. Maya read the report at her desk in Washington, made notes in the margins, filed it with the rest of her Granger County materials. The monitoring period ended, the federal oversight lifted. The sheriff's office was on its own now, for better or worse. Janet Wallace, the interim sheriff, had been elected to a full term. She had campaigned on reform, on accountability, on building trust. Whether she meant it, whether she could deliver, was a question only time would answer. Tanner remained in prison. Morrow remained in prison. Hollins was somewhere in Florida, living out his probation, stripped of everything he had built. And the people of Granger County went on with their lives. Maya visited her mother one last time in December. The holiday season had always been their time together. Ruth decorated the house with the same ornaments she had used for 40 years, baked the same cookies, played the same carols on the old record player that had belonged to Maya's father. They sat together on Christmas Eve, watching the lights on the tree blink in patterns. "I've been thinking," Ruth said. "About what?" "About retiring. Fully, I mean. Moving somewhere smaller. Maybe closer to you." Maya looked at her mother. Ruth was 70 now, still strong, still sharp, but showing the years more than before. "What about the house?" Your friends, the church. They'll still be here. I'll visit. Ruth shrugged. But this place holds a lot of memories, not all of them good anymore. Because of what happened to me? Because of all of it, the trial, the threats, watching you fight a battle that should never have been necessary in the first place. Ruth's voice was quiet. I'm proud of what you did. But I'm also tired, baby. Tired of living in a place where I have to wonder who I can trust. Maya reached over and took her mother's hand. You don't have to decide now. Take your time, and whatever you choose, I'll support you. I know you will. Ruth squeezed her hand. You always have. They sat in silence for a while, watching the lights. What about you? Ruth asked finally. What's next for you? Maya thought about the cases waiting on her desk, the new investigations, the patterns she had started to identify in other jurisdictions, other departments, other systems. More of the same, I guess. There's always more work to do. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Maya smiled slightly. I don't know how to do anything else, Mama. I don't know how to see something wrong and not try to fix it. Even when fixing it cost you everything? Even then. Ruth nodded slowly. Then you do what you have to do, and you call me at least once a week, and you come home when you can. I will. Promise? I promise. The phone rang at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in February. Maya reached for it in the darkness, her heart already racing. Hollins. Ms. Hollins, this is Dr. Patterson at Granger County Hospital. Your mother has been admitted. She collapsed at home this evening. Her neighbor found her and called 911. The world tilted. Maya was on her feet, reaching for clothes before the doctor finished speaking. How is she? What happened? She's stable now. It appears to be a stroke. We've run tests, started treatment. But you should come as soon as possible. Maya was in her car within 20 minutes, on the highway within 30. The drive took 7 hours. She made it in 6. Ruth was awake when Maya arrived. She looked smaller in the hospital bed, surrounded by monitors and IV lines. But her eyes were clear, and when she saw Maya, she smiled. Took you long enough. Maya sat down beside the bed, took her mother's hand, tried to think of something to say. I'm here now. I know. Ruth's voice was weaker than usual, but steady. Don't look at me like that. I'm not dying. The doctor said it was a minor stroke and I'm expected to make a full recovery. I heard him. Ruth squeezed her hand. I'm old, baby. Things break down. It happens. Doesn't mean the end is near. Maya blinked back tears she hadn't known she was crying. You scared me. I know. I'm sorry. Ruth's eyes softened. But I'm okay, really. Just need some rest, some rehabilitation, maybe a few lifestyle changes. Maybe that smaller house you mentioned, closer to D.C. Maybe. Ruth smiled again. We'll talk about it, when I'm out of here. Maya stayed for a week, slept in the hospital room, ate in the hospital cafeteria, watched her mother regain strength one day at a time. The rehabilitation would take months, the full recovery longer. But Ruth was fighting, as she always had, with the stubbornness that Maya had inherited. On the last day of her visit, Maya sat with her mother in the hospital's small garden. Ruth was in a wheelchair, wrapped in a blanket, watching the birds at a nearby feeder. You need to get back to work, Ruth said. It can wait. No, it can't. You've got cases, people depending on you. Ruth looked at her daughter. I'll be fine. The nurses here are excellent. Your cousin's coming to stay with me once I'm discharged. You've done everything you can. It doesn't feel like enough. It never does. That's why you're good at what you do. Ruth reached out and touched Maya's face. Go. Fight the good fight. Save the world, one corrupt sheriff at a time. Maya laughed despite herself. I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. Always. Maya returned to Washington. She threw herself into work. New cases, new investigations, the familiar rhythm of documentation and analysis and careful, patient building of evidence. But something had shifted. The near loss of her mother had shaken something loose, a reminder of what mattered, of why she did the work in the first place. It wasn't about awards or recognition. It wasn't even about catching the bad guys, though that was part of it. It was about the people she had met in Granger County. Patricia Vance, who had spent 15 years wondering if her complaint would ever be taken seriously. Jerome Washington, whose arm still ached on cold days. Kevin Stahl, who had lost his career for telling the truth. It was about Ruth, who had raised her daughter to believe that justice was worth fighting for, even when the odds were long and the cost was high. It was about all the battles still to come. The new case file arrived on her desk in March. Maya opened it, read the summary. A sheriff's department in rural Georgia. Citizen complaints. Allegations of abuse. A pattern that looked uncomfortably familiar. She pulled up the details, cross-referenced with other databases, made notes, and then, buried in the supplementary materials, she found something that made her stop. The lead complainant's name, Kevin Stahl, former deputy, Granger County Sheriff's Office. She read further. Stahl had moved to Georgia after leaving Florida, had tried to start over, but he had witnessed something at his new job. Abuse of power, false arrests, the same kind of misconduct he had seen before. And this time, he wasn't staying silent. He had filed a detailed complaint with the FBI field office in Atlanta, had provided documentation, had named names, and he had specifically requested that his case be referred to the DOJ office of the Inspector General, to a particular agent, an agent he trusted. Maya sat back in her chair. The cycle continued. The work never ended. Old battles fed into new ones. Old allies became new complainants. The struggle for accountability stretched on across years and jurisdictions. She picked up the phone. This is Agent Hollins. I'd like to speak with Kevin Stahl in Georgia. Can you connect me? The conversation lasted 2 hours. Stahl told her everything. The new department, the old patterns, the moment he had realized that running away hadn't solved anything, that the same problems followed him wherever he went. I thought about staying quiet, he said. I really did. Just keeping my head down, collecting a paycheck, pretending I didn't see what I saw. What changed? You did. His voice was quiet but firm. What you did in Granger County. The way you kept fighting, even when everyone told you to give up. It reminded me why I became a cop in the first place. To protect people, not to protect the system. Maya was silent for a moment. What happens now, Kevin? It won't be easy. You know that. I know. They'll come after you. Retaliation. Harassment. Maybe worse. Let them. Stahl's voice hardened. I've been through it before. I survived. And this time, I'm not alone. No, Maya agreed. You're not. She hung up the phone, sat at her desk, looking at the case file, the mountain of work ahead. And for the first time in a long time, she smiled. The investigation took 2 years. Maya led a team of 6 agents, coordinating with the FBI, the Civil Rights Division, and local advocacy groups who had been documenting abuses for years. It was painstaking work. Interviews, document reviews, subpoenas, court battles over access to records, the slow, grinding process of building a case that would hold up under scrutiny. But piece by piece, the evidence accumulated. By the time the indictments were handed down, 12 law enforcement officials in 3 Georgia counties faced federal charges. Pattern or practice investigations were opened in 2 departments. A state senator was implicated in a cover-up scheme. Kevin Stahl testified before a grand jury, then before a congressional subcommittee. He became, in his quiet way, a symbol of what one person could accomplish by refusing to stay silent. The reforms that followed were more comprehensive than anything Maya had seen in Granger County. New policies, new leadership, a cultural shift that, for once, seemed genuine. It wouldn't last forever. Nothing did. The struggle for accountability was never won, only renewed, generation after generation. But for now, it was enough. Ruth moved to Virginia in the spring of her 72nd year, a small townhouse, 20 minutes from Maya's apartment, close enough to visit on weekends, far enough to maintain independence. The house in Granger County was sold. The azalea bushes transplanted to the new garden, the old furniture arranged in new rooms. It looked different, felt different, but Ruth adapted as she always had. "Not bad," she said, surveying her new living room. "Could use some work, but not bad." Maya helped her unpack boxes, hung pictures, installed the same bird feeder that had graced the magnolia tree in Florida. "You sure about this?" Maya asked. "It's a big change." "Change is good." Ruth settled into her favorite chair, the one she had brought all the way from Granger County. "Besides, I'm not getting any younger. Nice to have family nearby." "Nice to have you nearby." Ruth smiled. "Don't think this means I'm going to stop nagging you about working too hard. I wouldn't dream of it." They sat together, watching the afternoon light fade. "You know what I was thinking about today?" Ruth said. "What?" "That night, the traffic stop. Everything that happened after." She shook her head slowly. "If someone had told me then what would come of it, all the investigations and trials and reforms, I wouldn't have believed them." "Neither would I." "But you kept going anyway, kept fighting." "I had help. You, Geneva, Kevin, all the people who came forward, who trusted me with their stories." Maya paused. "I couldn't have done it alone." "Nobody does anything alone. That's the whole point." Ruth reached over and patted her daughter's hand. "But someone has to start. Someone has to be willing to take the first step, even when they don't know where it'll lead." "And if I hadn't? If I had just paid the fine and moved on?" "Then someone else would have, eventually. The truth doesn't stay buried forever." Ruth's eyes were clear and steady. "But I'm glad it was you. Glad you were the one who stood up." Maya felt her throat tighten. "Thanks, Mama. Thank me by taking a vacation sometime, a real one." "I'll try." "You always say that." "This time I mean it." Ruth laughed. The sound filled the room, warm and familiar. Outside, the sun set on a new city, a new home, a new chapter. But some things remained constant. The work, the struggle, the belief passed from mother to daughter that justice was worth fighting for. Always. Maya's phone buzzed at 7 a.m. on a Monday. She picked it up, expecting work. The usual, a case update, a meeting request, a new complaint to review. Instead, she found a message from an unknown number. "You made a difference. Granger County remembers." Attached was a photograph. A group of children, black and white together, standing in front of the new community center that had been built on the site of the old sheriff's office annex. They were smiling. Maya looked at the photograph for a long time. Then she saved it to her phone, got dressed, and went to work. Epilogue. 5 years later. Maya stood at the podium in a lecture hall at Georgetown Law School, looking out at a sea of young faces. "The question I get asked most often," she said, "is whether reform is possible, whether systems that have been corrupt for generations can actually change." She paused, letting the question hang. "The honest answer is, I don't know. Not completely, not permanently. The forces that create corruption, the incentives that protect it, they're deeply embedded in how institutions work. You can't eliminate them with a single investigation or a single prosecution. But you can make progress. You can shift the calculus even slightly. You can make abuse more costly, accountability more likely, transparency more valued. You can create cracks in the wall, even if you can't tear it down. She looked at the students. Some of you will become prosecutors. Some will become defense attorneys. Some will go into government or advocacy or journalism. Whatever you do, you'll face a choice. You'll see something wrong, and you'll have to decide whether to speak up or stay silent. It will be easier to stay silent. It almost always is. The people around you will tell you it's not your problem, that someone else will handle it, that you can't afford to risk your career, your safety, your relationships. They might even be right. Sometimes the cost is too high. Sometimes the battle isn't worth fighting. But if everyone stays silent, nothing ever changes. And if you have the power to make a difference, if you have knowledge that others don't, if you're in a position to act when others can't, then silence becomes its own kind of choice. She thought about Granger County, about the road she had traveled to get here, about all the people who had helped her along the way. I'm not going to tell you what to do. That's not my place. But I will tell you this. The work matters, even when you lose, even when the system protects the people it should punish, even when justice is partial and delayed and imperfect. It matters because it adds up. One case at a time, one voice at a time, one refusal to stay silent. That's how change happens. Slowly, painfully, but it happens. She stepped back from the podium. Thank you for listening. I'll take questions now. The questions lasted an hour. Afterward, as the students filed out, one young woman approached the podium. Agent Hollins, I'm sorry to bother you. I just wanted to say, my grandmother lives in Granger County. She told me about what happened there, about what you did. Maya looked at her. Early 20s, earnest eyes, the next generation. What's your name? Carter. Jamil Carter. I mean, I'm his sister. Jamil was the one who got stopped walking home. The one your mother told you about. Maya remembered. The 17-year-old made to sit on the curb. One of the stories that had planted the seed. How is your brother? He's good. He's a cop now, actually, in Tallahassee. Said he wanted to be the kind of officer he wished he'd met that night. Maya felt something swell in her chest. Pride. Hope. The small, stubborn belief that things could get better. That's really good to hear. Yeah. The young woman smiled. My grandmother wanted me to tell you something if I ever met you. She said, tell that woman thank you. Tell her we remember. Maya blinked back tears. Tell your grandmother I remember too. She walked out of the lecture hall into the spring sunshine. Her phone buzzed. A new case file forwarded from headquarters. A sheriff's department in rural Mississippi. Familiar pattern. Maya looked at the message for a moment. Then she put the phone away and kept walking. The case could wait until tomorrow. Today, she would take a walk, buy some flowers, visit her mother. The work would still be there. It always was. But so was everything else. The life she had built, the people who mattered, the small, everyday victories that made the struggle worthwhile. She walked on, into the light.